Alright, so now that we have covered the complete theory part, alright, it's time to do the first problem. Okay, and this is there in your PDF notes. Okay, so we have balance sheet and we have the P&L account, and we have to find the rest of these ratios. Okay, now as you can see that we have been provided that the share capital is uh, 10 rupees each share. Okay, and the total amount is 100 lakh. Then you have reserves and surplus. You know what this is? Regardless of the name, the total reserve and surplus is your owner's profit. Okay, then we also have the secured loan, which is 14% debentures. Therefore, whatever interest that you have to calculate on debentures, that would be at 14% of 50 lakh. Okay, and then among other liabilities, we have some creditors of 30 lakh, and the dividend. Alright, the dividend amount is 15 lakh. This is what is provided as the dividend profit. Okay, on asset side, we have the fixed assets of land, building, plant and machinery and others. Alright, and the current assets include some inventory, that is stock. Okay, you have your debtors, and then there's some cash in bank around 20 lakh. So all in all, this is the balance sheet, and we have this P&L account. So we have opening stock, we have been given what is the gross profit. Okay, what is the closing stock, what is the amount of sales. Okay, we have different kind of expenses. We have the interest on debentures, we have the income tax. Okay, and therefore the net profit. Alright. So this is pretty much everything that we would need. Alright, so now let's talk about the ratios. The first one is current ratio. Okay, the first is current ratio. Now current ratio, you must remember that it is equal to current assets divided by current liabilities. Very simple, because the current assets are provided to be what? 31 plus 54 plus 20, right? Which is equal to 105. Okay, and current liabilities are 45, right? 30 plus 15. So this becomes 105 divided by 45, which comes to 2.33. Okay, so this is your current ratio. Now the second is quick ratio. Now quick ratio, you remember that it is quick assets divided by your current liabilities, until unless it is given in the question, right? So your quick asset would include current asset minus stock minus prepaid expenses, if any. Now because in this question there are no prepaid expenses, therefore current assets minus stock would be how much? 74. Alright, so this divided by your current liabilities, so 105 minus 31 divided by 45, which is equal to 74 upon 45, right? 1.64. अब देखिए, करंट रेशियो की हमने बात की थी, तो हमने किया था करंट एसेट को डिवाइड करंट लाइबिलिटी से, और ये सारी चीज़ें समेशन करके हमारे पास सिंपली वैल्यू आ गई 2.33. क्विक रेशियो में हमने करंट एसेट्स में से स्टॉक्स या इन्वेंट्री जो है उसकी वैल्यू डिलीट कर दी, ठीक है, सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दी, और डिवाइड कर दिया करंट लाइबिलिटीज से. हमने याद किया, हमने दो फॉर्मूला पढ़े थे क्विक रेशियो के, एक ये वाला, और इसके अलावा हमने पढ़ा था क्विक एसेट डिवाइडेड बाय क्विक लाइबिलिटी. तो क्विक लाइबिलिटी हम लोग तब यूज करेंगे जब क्वेश्चन में दे रखा हो अलग से. ठीक है, अब नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है, नेक्स्ट हमें फाइंड आउट करना है ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट रेशियो। ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट रेशियो क्या होता है? सिंपली आपका ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट डिवाइडेड बाय नेट सेल्स। ठीक है, हमें ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट भी दे रखा है, so for gross profit ratio we have both the values. Gross profit is 90 and the net sales is 270. Alright, so 90 divided, so 90 divided by 270 into 100, okay, which comes out around 33.33%. This is your gross profit ratio. ठीक है, now the next is net profit ratio. And simple, it is also net profit divided by net sales. Right, here we have 270. Net profit भी हमें दे रखा है, we have been provided by net profit also, which is 28. Okay, so 28 divided by 270 into 100 will come around 10.37%. ठीक है, अभी तक क्लियर है सबको? वी हैव स्टडीड करंट रेशियो, क्विक रेशियो, ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट रेशियो and net profit ratio. All these values we have been clearly given in the question itself. Alright, so it's been very easy. Next we have return on assets. Alright, now return on assets, how many assets do we have in the question? Assets would be your total assets, so 310, this is right here. Okay, and return on total assets, right? Return on total assets, so what do you calculate in return? That is PAT, profit after tax, right? Do we have this profit? Yes. Why? Because you remember that net profit is profit after tax, right? Whether you call it profit after tax or earnings after tax or net profit, it is the same. So therefore you have both the values for return on assets, which is equal to net profit, or you can call it profit after tax upon total assets. Okay, so this is equal to 28 divided by 310 into 100. All right, and this comes to around 9%. Okay, so return on assets is also there. All right, next we have return on capital employed. Return in this case is what? Here it is earnings before interest and tax, EBIT, if you remember our formula. इनफैक्ट थ्योरी में मैंने बहुत ही क्लियरली पढ़ाया था कि जब हम रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल एम्प्लॉयड लेते हैं तो इस केस में जो प्रॉफिट की वैल्यू हम लेते हैं, द प्रॉफिट वैल्यू दैट वी टेक इज अर्निंग बिफोर इंटरेस्ट एंड टैक्स. ऑलराइट, एंड इट इज द रिटर्न कैलकुलेटेड ऑन कैपिटल एम्प्लॉयड, सो हमारे डिनोमिनेटर में कैपिटल एम्प्लॉयड आएगा. ओके, नाउ व्हाट इज द कैपिटल एम्प्लॉयड? देखिए यहाँ पर जो भी आपकी वैल्यू है इसमें आप देखिए, here your share capital, reserve and surplus and secured loan, these three headers. ठीक है, these are your capital. ठीक है, ये तीनों मिला के जो इनका समेशन है, मिला के जो है कैपिटल हो गया. ठीक है, तो आप या तो ये निकाल सकते हैं 100 प्लस 100 प्लस 35 प्लस 50, ऐसे करेंगे तो भी 285 आएगा, या फिर आप ऐसा भी कर सकते हैं कि 330 माइनस 45. ठीक है ना, तो कैपिटल एम्प्लॉयड इज 285. ऑलराइट, एंड अर्निंग बिफोर इंटरेस्ट एंड टैक्स, EBIT जो है, देखिए यहाँ पर क्या था, जो हमारा टोटल प्रॉफिट था, ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट, उसमें से हमने एस्टेब्लिशमेंट एक्सपेंसेस माइनस किए, ये एक्सपेंसेस माइनस किए और ये एक्सपेंसेस माइनस किए, राइट। तो if we subtract these expenses but find out the value at this level, right, that means कि हम नेट प्रॉफिट निकालने के पहले डिबेंचर्स और टैक्स की वैल्यू सब्ट्रैक्ट ना करें, तो हमारा टैक्स की वैल्यू आ जाएगी अर्निंग बिफोर इंटरेस्ट एंड टैक्स, राइट, इस वैल्यू तक। तो इसलिए हाउ वी कैन फाइंड इट इजीली इज 28 प्लस 9 प्लस 7, 28 प्लस 9 प्लस 7, सो 28 प्लस 16, 44 जो है आपका EBIT आ जाएगा। ये क्लियर है? देखिए नेट प्रॉफिट जो हमने पढ़ा था, दैट इज प्रॉफिट आफ्टर टैक्स, और प्रॉफिट आफ्टर टैक्स में से अगर टैक्स ऐड कर देंगे तो वो हो जाएगा प्रॉफिट बिफोर टैक्स, और उसमें भी अगर आप इंटरेस्ट ऐड कर देंगे तो आपका आ जाएगा अर्निंग बिफोर इंटरेस्ट एंड टैक्स, ठीक है। तो अब हम उल्टा जा रहे हैं, वी आर गोइंग इन द रिवर्स साइकिल। इफ यू सब्ट्रैक्ट from earning before interest and tax, if you subtract interest it will become profit before tax, and then if you subtract tax then it will become net profit. So now we are going in the reverse direction, we are adding both the income tax and the debentures, interest on debentures, to the net profit in order to find your earning before interest and tax. So therefore it becomes 44 divided by 285 into 100, which comes to 15.44%. Okay. Okay. Next we have inventory turnover ratio. Next we have is inventory turnover ratio or stock turnover ratio, which is equal to cost of goods sold divided by average stock. Okay. Now see, first let's see the easy one. Now here you have, there is no such average stock given to you, but here you do have the values of opening stock and closing stock, right? And I had told you that average stock is equal to opening stock plus closing stock divided by 2. Okay, average stock is equal to opening stock plus closing stock divided by 2. ठीक है, ये हमने पढ़ा था कि एवरेज स्टॉक हम कैसे कैलकुलेट कर सकते हैं, ओपनिंग स्टॉक प्लस क्लोजिंग स्टॉक, ये दोनों वैल्यूज हमें दे रखी हैं, डिवाइडेड बाय 2, ठीक है। अब दूसरी चीज जो इसमें हमें कैलकुलेट करनी है वो है cost of goods sold. The next thing that we have to calculate is cost of goods sold. So because gross profit is equal to sales minus cost of goods sold, right? You remember that gross profit is equal to sales minus cost of goods sold. This is how you calculate the gross profit. Therefore, cost of goods sold is equal to sales minus gross profit. See, whenever with whatever values you are given, you have to utilize those, right? In this question, इस question में आपको sales की value भी दे रखी है और gross profit value भी दे रखी है, आपको cost of goods sold निकालना है, you have to find out cost of goods sold. So you can simply subtract sales minus gross profit. ओवरऑल ये फॉर्मूला हमारा बन जाता है. So our values will be sales minus gross profit is what? 270 minus 90, ठीक है ना, 180. Opening stock is 36 and closing stock 31. So 36 plus 31 divide by 2, ठीक है, ये आ जाएगा आपका 33.5. So therefore इन्वेंट्री टर्नओवर रेशियो या स्टॉक टर्नओवर रेशियो की वैल्यू हो जाएगी 180 अपॉन 33.5. ठीक है, कैलकुलेट कर सकते हैं. So this value is coming to 5.37. Right. Basically इन्वेंट्री टर्नओवर रेशियो का मतलब है 5.37 टाइम्स एक साल में ये जो है इन्वेंट्री को टर्न किया जाता है. राइट, वो साइकिल याद है ना. सो इन अ ईयर दिस होल एक्टिविटी इज डन 5.37 times. Purchase, stock and sale, that activity is done 5.37 times. Okay, now the next question is stock holding period. Now this is very simple. Once you have calculated the stock turnover ratio or the inventory turnover ratio you have calculated, after that finding the stock holding period is pretty easy. Why? Because how you calculate this is 360 days divided by your stock turnover ratio. जब एक बार आपके पास इन्वेंट्री टर्नओवर रेशियो आ जाते हैं तो उसके बाद ये वैल्यू निकालना, स्टॉक होल्डिंग पीरियड की वैल्यू निकालना बहुत आसान है. सिंपली डिवाइड कर दीजिए 360 को 5.37 से, ठीक है, और जो वैल्यू आ जाएगी आपके पास 67 डेज. ठीक है, so 67 days is the stock holding period. इसका क्या मतलब है? इसका मतलब ये है कि जो पूरी साइकिल है हमारी इन्वेंट्री को होल्ड करने की वो 67 डेज की बड़ी साइकिल है, मतलब लगभग 2 महीने. ठीक है, और क्योंकि लगभग 2 महीने के अराउंड है तो ये साइकिल ओवरऑल अराउंड 5.37 टाइम्स पूरे साल में होती है, इतने टाइम्स. ठीक है, दिस मीन्स दैट द ओवरऑल stock holding period is that of 67 days, and therefore the whole activity is done around 5 times in a year. Okay, the next is similar to stock turnover ratio is your debtors turnover ratio. Okay, and here in debtor turnover ratio we used to have your credit sales divided by average debtors. Now see, इसमें मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया था कि if you do not have the value of credit sales, credit sales की value अगर specifically specified नहीं है, if it is not been specified, then you will use sales itself. Alright, so here we will use the value of sales itself, which is 270, and again in your P&L you can see, sorry, in your balance sheet you can see that the debtors also only single value is provided to you. No, there is no other value of average debtors. So you will assume कि 54 जो आपको single value दे रखी है debtors की, that is the average debtors. ये assume कर लेंगे. So therefore you will take 270 divided by 54, which is equal to 5. Alright. So the overall debtors turnover ratio is done 5 times in a year. Now the next question is debtors velocity, right? या फिर average collection period. I had told you that this is also called debtors velocity. मैंने आपको बताया था कि इसको debtors velocity भी बोलते हैं and this will be calculated by simply देखिए एक बार आपने debtors turnover ratio निकाल लिया तो average collection period निकालना उतना ही आसान है जितना स्टॉक होल्डिंग पीरियड निकालना था एक बार आपने जब इन्वेंट्री टर्नओवर रेशियो निकाल लिया राइट सो दिस इज आल्सो बिकम्स वेरी इजी बिकॉज ऑफ दिस रेशियो you simply divide 360 days by your debtor turnover ratio. Okay, so 360 divided by 5, 72 days. Okay. So in 72 days you collect. The cycle of collecting money is of 72 days. Okay, next we have creditors turnover ratio, and this is simple. I think you all remember this. Creditors purchase divided by average creditor. Okay, you will simply take, इसमें आपको purchase दे रखा है, you have been given purchase, there is no average, there is no starting or anything, so you will take credit purchase as the whole purchase. ठीक है, क्योंकि कोई और वैल्यू नहीं दे रखी है तो आप परचेज की वैल्यू को पूरे को क्रेडिट परचेज मान लेंगे 175. एंड नेक्स्ट है आपका एवरेज क्रेडिटर्स. ठीक है, क्योंकि क्रेडिटर्स की वैल्यू भी सिंगल दे रखी है आपको 30, तो फिर आप इसको पूरा एवरेज क्रेडिटर मान लेंगे. ओके, सो यू विल टेक क्रेडिट परचेजेस 175 divided by 30. Okay, which comes to 5.83 times. Okay, and based on the same, if you will calculate average payment period or creditors payment period, you can simply say 360 days divided by creditor turnover ratio, which is 360 divided by 5.83. Okay, which comes to 62 days. क्लियर है. एवरेज क्रेडिटर पेमेंट पीरियड हमारा काफ़ी सिंपली है. 360 डेज को हम डिवाइड कर देंगे अपने क्रेडिटर टर्नओवर रेशियो से, तो 360 डिवाइडेड बाय 5.83 हमारी वैल्यू आ जाएगी 62 डेज. ऑलराइट, सो यहाँ तक हमने अभी आधे क्वेश्चंस कर लिए. फिक्स्ड एसेट turnover ratio. Okay, now remember when we had studied fixed assets, तो हमने क्या पढ़ा था कि जब टर्नओवर रेशियो की बात करते हैं तो न्यूमरेटर में आ जाता है आपका टर्नओवर. ठीक है, और डिनोमिनेटर में जिस भी टाइप का रेशियो आप निकाल रहे हैं, वेदर इट इज़ फिक्स्ड एसेट्स, ओके, और इट इज़ वर्किंग कैपिटल और टोटल एसेट्स, डिनोमिनेटर में आ जाएगा जो भी रेशियो आप निकाल रहे हैं. सो देयरफॉर यहाँ पर डिनोमिनेटर में आ जाएगा टर्नओवर बाय फिक्स्ड एसेट्स. तो टोटल टर्नओवर इज व्हाट, जो आपका नेट सेल है, ओवरऑल नेट सेल इज योर टोटल टर्नओवर. ओके, and fixed assets we had calculated. Okay, fixed assets are already given, 20 plus 75, so 95 plus 110 plus 20, overall 210. 25 lakh are your fixed assets. Okay, so 270 divided by 225, value comes out to be 1.2, which is your fixed assets turnover ratio. Next is total assets turnover ratio. Now, I don't think कि मुझे ये पढ़ाने की भी ज़रूरत है. This is already clear to you, right? How will we calculate this? Turnover divided by total assets. Okay. Turnover हमारी net sales कितनी है? 270. Total assets कितने हैं? Current plus fixed assets. Current assets हमने निकाले थे 105. ठीक है, 31 plus 54 plus 20. And anyway हमें total assets दे भी रखा है, that it is 310. So therefore we divide this by 310 to get the value. How much value? Less than 1. What does this mean? That some of our assets, they are going to wastage. So the company is not doing that well. 1 rupee of your total asset is generating less than 1 rupee of the sales, of the turnover. Okay, तो ये क्लियर है हमें. टोटल एसेट टर्नओवर रेशियो में हमारे जितने टोटल एसेट्स हैं उससे कम हमारा सेल आ रहा है. अगर 1 रुपए का टोटल एसेट है तो सेल केवल 87 पैसे की आ रही है. तो कंपनी जो है उतनी अच्छी सेल नहीं कर पा रही है अगेंस्ट द टोटल एसेट्स. नेक्स्ट वी हैव टू फाइंड आउट वर्किंग कैपिटल टर्नओवर रेशियो. और जैसा कि मैंने आपको बताया था, इन टर्नओवर रेशियोज न्यूमरेटर में टर्नओवर रहेगा और डिनोमिनेटर में जो भी रेशियो है, वट एवर रेशियो यू आर फाइंडिंग, so here will be working capital. And what is working capital? Working capital is determined by current asset minus current liability. I hope the theory part is you all remember. Okay, so turnover is 270. What is the current asset? We have just seen 105. What is the current liability? If you remember, it is 30 plus 15. Okay, that is 45. So 105 minus 45, which comes to 270 by 60, right? So 4.5. So the working capital ratio is 4.5. Next is net worth turnover ratio. Again, nothing different here. Total your turnover divided by net worth. Net worth is the same as your equity or shareholder fund, which is already given to you. Okay. In here. So basically the share capital and the reserves and surplus. The summation is जितना भी इसका सम आएगा वो है आपका नेट वर्थ. ठीक है, तो 100 plus 100 235. 235 lakh is नेट वर्थ. ठीक है ना. नेटवर्थ का कैलकुलेशन सबको क्लियर होना चाहिए. इट शुड बी वेरी क्लियर, राइट? Because share capital plus reserves and surplus, this is what the shareholder fund, shareholders own. Okay, so therefore 235 lakh is the net worth. So 270 divided by 235, which comes to 1.15 times. Okay. So your net worth to turnover ratio comes to 1.15 times. Next we have to find debt to equity ratio. As you remember that the coverage ratios are as the name says. So you simply take debt divided by equity. Equity we had just calculated was 235 lakh. Debt has been directly given to you. Okay, debt has been directly given to you as 50 lakh. So 50 divided by 235, that is around 0.21. Next is interest coverage ratio. Okay, now interest coverage ratio, we used to take earnings before interest and taxes divided by the interest. Okay, now what is the interest? We've already been given that the interest on debentures is 7. So this is interest. Okay, now I had told you yesterday, like in the previous recording, that earning before interest and tax can be calculated if you add income tax and interest to this profit after tax. Okay, so 28 plus 16, 44 is the earning before interest and tax. So therefore it becomes 44 divided by 7. So 6.3 is the interest coverage ratio. Okay, so this is good. 6.3 is a decent enough interest coverage ratio. Next we have is earnings per share. Next we have to calculate earnings per share or EPS. How do we calculate this? It is profit after tax minus preference dividend divided by number of equity shares, right? Earnings per share is PAT minus preference dividend divided by the number of equity shares. So preference dividend here in the capital structure, we know that there is only share capital and reserve and surplus. There is no preference dividend, okay, because there is no preference share capital. Okay, so preference dividend becomes 0. And what is profit after tax? 28, right? Profit after tax is 28. Preference dividend share is 0, and number of equity shares, you know, has been provided as 10 lakh, right? So you have 28 minus 0 divided by 10 lakh shares. So 2.8 rupees is the earnings per share. Okay, 2.8 rupees. So as an owner, you will be earning 2.8 rupees per equity share. Okay, next is dividend per share. Okay, and this would be whatever total equity dividend is there, okay, divided by the again number of equity shares. So equity dividend is how much? 15 lakh. Equity shares is 10 lakh. Therefore, 1.5 rupees is the dividend earned per share. Next, we have dividend payout ratio. Okay, dividend payout ratio was simple, that is dividend per share divided by earnings per share. We have already calculated both these values. So 1.5 divided by 2.8 into 100, okay, which came to 54%, which comes around 54%. Dividend payout ratio is calculated by dividend per share divided by earnings per share. Okay, next is dividend yield ratio. Okay, dividend yield ratio was your dividend per share divided by the current market price. Now in the question it has been written, right, that the market price of the share is rupees 34 per share. Okay, and dividend payout ratio we have already calculated. Sorry, dividend per share we've already calculated. This is your 1.5 divided by 34 into 100. So 4.41% is the value of your dividend yield ratio. Okay, and finally देखिए डिविडेंड यील्ड रेशियो काफ़ी इजी था क्योंकि इसमें हमको सिंपली डिविडेंड पर शेयर डिवाइड करना होता है करंट मार्केट प्राइस से. करंट मार्केट प्राइस कोर्स क्वेश्चन में ऑलरेडी बता रखा है 34 रुपीज़. डिविडेंड पर शेयर की वैल्यू 1.5 हमने अभी निकाली थी यहाँ पर. ठीक है, तो फाइनली 1.5 डिवाइडेड बाय 34 इंटू 100, 4.41 हमारा डिविडेंड यील्ड रेशियो आ गया. लास्ट इज पीई रेशियो. ठीक है, लास्ट जो हमें निकालना है प्राइस अर्निंग्स रेशियो. सारे रेशियोज बाकी के कवर हो चुके हैं. प्राइस अर्निंग्स इज सिंपली प्राइस बाय अर्निंग्स, या जिसको आप बोल सकते हैं करंट मार्केट प्राइस डिवाइडेड बाय अर्निंग पर शेयर. ठीक है, तो इसकी वैल्यू हो जाएगी आपकी करंट मार्केट प्राइस इज 34 रुपीज़. अर्निंग पर शेयर हमने निकाला था 2.8 वैल्यू आई थी. ठीक है, तो 34 डिवाइडेड बाय 2.8 दोनों रुपीज़ में है. सो देयरफॉर द आंसर इज 12 times. Okay, so price earnings ratio comes 12 times. Okay, so with this we complete the first problem. All right, second problem you guys need to solve yourself, and if there are any issues or some sort of doubts, then you can contact me.